Forgiveness. Forgiveness is an issue that comes up anytime that I'm dealing with someone who has problem in their marriage, who has problem with their family, who has anger problems, who have bitterness problems, have spiritual issues. They're not feeling very close to God and they can't figure out why. And forgiveness comes up all the time. Not forgiveness, but the lack of forgiveness. Even as a believer, a Christian, we know that God tells us very clearly that we're to forgive. And when we're not forgiving, we're putting a wall up between us and God, a dissonance that causes us to have trouble because we're not connecting with God. We don't feel that our prayers are answered. We don't feel joy. We just struggle. It's important that we know what forgiveness is not. Just some examples. Forgiveness is not about having good feelings about the person that you've forgiven. Because that our flesh, what we're used to, what we've struggled with our whole life, even if we've forgiven it, it will still come back and bother us at times. And sometimes that's not a very decent person to be around anyway. So every time they do something that needs to be forgiven, you struggle even more. So forgiveness is not necessarily having good feelings about the person you've forgiven. Forgiveness is not about having to trust that person. You forgive that person for stealing something. You're not going to leave your wallet out around them because there's trust issues there. Forgiveness it's not denial that you are hurt. It's recognizing you were hurt and why you felt hurt and being able to forgive that hurt and let that hurt go. Forgiveness is not about removing the possible consequences. Forgiveness is not easy, and it's probably not a one-time event. In other words, you have to, every time those sick feelings come up, you have to forgive again. You might have to forgive somebody over and over and over again over the years. You might still be needing to forgive someone who's not even around anymore, someone who's dead, someone who hasn't been in your life in a long time. But when that feeling comes up, you have to forgive again. So it's not a one-time event. Now, the ability to be emotionally and mentally healthy is blocked by our inability to forgive. Now, it's pretty easy to see that even if you're not a spiritual person. But if you're a spiritual person, if you're a person of faith who believes in God, if you're a person of faith who believes in Jesus Christ, it's much more obvious because we're taught the importance of forgiving. We're commanded to forgive, just like God forgives us. So, Ephesians 4:31, the Apostle Paul writes, the dangers of unforgiveness, I think, is this verse. Get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, harsh words, and slander, as well as all types of evil behavior. Look, it's so hard to not be angry, not be enraged, not speak harshly, treat people unkind. When you have forgiveness, the lack of forgiveness in your life. He writes in the next verse, Ephesians 4:32, he says, instead, be kind to each other, tenderhearted, forgiving one another. No, just because he hasn't forgiven you or she hasn't forgiven you, it doesn't mean you don't forgive them. You're hurting yourself. We're not usually, unless we're being unkind and brutal or whatever, we're not normally hurting someone else by not forgiving them. We're hurting ourselves a lot more. And then just as God, through Christ, has forgiven us. Gosh, think of all the things you've done. And Scripture makes it very clear. God makes it very clear. And you know if you've accepted His forgiveness, the relief that it gives you. And be kind to each other, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, just as God, through Christ, has forgiven you. Hey, you might have a hard time with that. But you have to forgive. You have to forgive. Hey, my name is Royal. I'm pastor of Life Connection Church in Euless, Texas. And hey, if you live in our area, Euless, Texas, Dallas-Fort Worth area, and you don't have a church home, be our guest at Life Connection Church. We believe that if you love God and you love people, it will change the world. If you love God and you love people, It will change you. Thank you. See you next time. God bless.